All right, welcome to Shifting Culture, everyone. And this right now is our best books of 2025 conversation. What are the best books that we read? Our favorite books. I have Byron Borger here and Lori Wilbert. Really excited to have both of you on. I'd love to start with you just having a brief introduction and then telling us what your reading was like in 2025. Were there any themes, anything that came up for you as you were putting your list together? What was your reading like in 2025? Lori, we'll start with you.
Okay. You said a brief introduction. Briefly,
Yeah.
Lori Wilbert, writer. I live in southeastern Pennsylvania. Yeah. This is a brief introduction that I'll introduce into the theme of my books for this year. But I worked on a novel, writing a novel this year, and so I read a lot of fiction this year. That was my probably 100 novels in 2025. So that was my theme of reading.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good. Byron?
Well, for those that don't know, my name is Byron Borger, and my wife and I own Hearts and Minds, which is a bookstore in Dallastown, Pennsylvania. Dallastown being southern York County, south of Harrisburg, in the middle of the state. Some people have heard of Hershey. York peppermint patties are made in York, used to be. And so that's where we are. And we've had a bookstore here, an independent bookstore, for about 43 years. We don't call ourselves a Christian bookstore as such, because only Christians go in Christian bookstores, and only certain kind of Christians go in Christian bookstores, actually. And so we're trying to sort of redefine and reimagine what a religious, faith-based bookstore can look like, which means we also carry all sorts of other titles, too, that aren't necessarily overtly religious. So we're kind of a weird place that people can't figure out, and we love talking about books. I have a newsletter where I do book reviews every week, and just love reading. And this year, I mean, just like other years, it seems like it's always a theme with me, but I read books about lament and the sorrows of the world, the problems in the world, whether it's, the war in Gaza or whatever, just sad stuff. But also, I love reading memoirs. My wife reads more fiction than I do, but I read memoirs. And some memoirs, it seems to me like if it was a novel, you'd say that plot doesn't make sense. Nobody could do that. But in a memoir, people are telling their life stories, and it's just unbelievably a glimpse into other people's lives. So I've read a lot of memoirs this year, not as many novels as Lori has, but man, I love hearing people just tell their story, and that's why I like memoirs so much.
Yeah. Well, 2025 was a fantastic year of reading. For me, I mean, I have to read for this podcast. So I read a lot of books that come in for the authors that I interview, the people that are on the podcast. And so I have a few of those on my top 10 list, but then I read some incredible novels as well. And so I have some of those on my list. I think the novels really shaped me a lot this year, helped me slow down and pay attention, and a couple of great memoirs that I've read. But a lot of it is like, what does it look like to live faithfully to Jesus? What does stories of love look like as opposed to stories of power and empire? And that's really a main theme. And I think a big theme was, what does it mean to be human in this day and age? And so humanity is a big theme that ran through 2025. I think it's something that we'll be wrestling with for a long time. It's like, who are we and why do we exist? And what does it mean to be human? And so let's just go through our list, and we'll be talking about a lot of these themes through it. So we'll start with Lori, then we'll go to Byron, and then to me. And we'll start with number 10. So Lori, what's your number 10?
Number 10 is The Serviceberry by Robin Wall Kimmerer. And so most people are probably familiar with her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, which was, I think it was one of my favorite books the year I read it. But I love this one. It's about a beloved little shrub that many of us, especially those of us in the northern parts of the United States, are familiar with. But it's a book. The subtitle is Abundance and Reciprocity in the Natural World. And so it's a book about the gift economy. It's a book about living unselfishly, living and not just living for a legacy, but also what does it mean to live unselfishly with our direct neighbors, and like regardless of what our
Yeah.
legacy is, what does it look like to live humans beside one another in a world that is just very consumeristic and materialistic? And so I really loved this one. It's small. It's a small gift book, and so very short and sweet and very readable. And it was just a taste of Braiding Sweetgrass, which was really just phenomenal. And but the same sort of themes that you found in Braiding Sweetgrass are in the Serviceberry as well.
Great.
I almost had that book on my list as well. It's certainly in my top 20 this year, and I pondered putting it in my top 10. It's one of my wife's favorite books as well. Braiding Sweetgrass is just a must read, and she's an indigenous scientist, a naturalist, and writes as a Native woman with this kind of sacred sense of creation. Boy, what a great writer! And so that really is a wonderful little book. I underscore that for sure.
Nice. That's good. Yeah, fantastic. A lot of themes there that'll probably come up on my list as well of what she's writing about there. So, Byron, what's your number 10?
Well, I have to say right from the start, and I won't say it too often, but I don't believe in top 10 lists exactly. I have a hard time differentiating between best books and most significant books and favorite books.
Yeah,
And
I know.
what
It's
I
hard.
recommend to others as a bookseller, I'm sort of always trying to read through the eyes of others. So I want to say, oh, this might be best for you. It may not be my personal favorite, but it's a really great read for this person or that person. So I get really confused knowing how to name them and narrow them and put them in ratings. All good book lovers, it's like, which of your children do you love the most? So this is really hard for me. I just want to say that you're putting me in a hard place here, Joshua. But I'll tell you, if I'm going to pick a top 10, I love the writer Carmen Joy Imes, and her most recent is called Becoming God's Family, which traces the theme of a resistance to individualism, but rather a sense of corporate and communal faith that begins in the covenant of the Old Testament and moves all the way through the becoming of the church in the New Testament. So it's not just a New Testament study of the church becoming God's family, but it sort of unfolds the Christian community where we get this notion of church from the Older Testament. It's part of a trilogy that all have these same kind of titles. One is Why the Law Still Matters in the Old Testament. The one I like the most is why being made in God's image and why bearing God's image still matters, or what it means that we have human dignity. That was the second one. And now this is the third. They have uniform coverage, 3 real readable books. She is quite a scholar, is working on a heavy technical commentary on Exodus right now. But these are sort of for ordinary readers. There's lots of good meat in here for Bible lovers, but also little sidebars and quotes of the Bible Project videos and really cool stuff. So it's very applicable. She gets real down and practical about the role of women in the body of Christ or eating meals together, just all kind of real practical stuff as well. But it's essentially an overview of the biblical notion of community. So Carmen Imes is a dream, a great writer, a wonderful woman, and I recommend any of her books. But that was one of my favorite Bible study books this year.
Great. Yeah, it's a really good book. I had a great conversation with her here on the podcast. And it was great, especially in our world of individualism and trying to do everything by ourselves, to actually say, why does that actually matter to be in community? And why does the table matter to come together?
Yeah.
It is really important, and especially in a time where we are isolated and alone more than ever. Like, the community actually matters.
About the church being multi-ethnic too. That the body of Christ is supposed to sort of embody a certain kind of reconciliation. So she's sort of multi-ethnic and multi-class, that the congregation needs to work hard at being that kind of community that sort of sets a witness to the world against our tribal identities. So I like that too. It's good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. My number 10, well, I read a lot of books about what does it mean to be human, that we have a productivity culture, we have a machine culture, we have things that we're continually wanting to be cogs in a machine. So I read things like Against the Machine, Paul Kingsnorth, which I thought the first half was probably my favorite. I was like, this is going to be my number 1 book of the year. And I thought the last half, he just is doesn't get the practicals of what does that actually look like to be human. He's trying, he's getting there, he's not quite there yet. So the second half didn't really land for me, but it was fantastic. I read, things like You Were Never Meant to Do It All, which I think is a fantastic little devotional by Kelly Kapic. And what does it mean to be human? But really, my favorite of that is my number 10 is Making Time by Maria Bowler. And so talking about productivity, creativity, and what does it mean to be human instead of being forced to be able to be, cogs in a machine. And so it's one of my favorite creativity books that I read this year. I also really love The Discipline of Inspiration, Carrie Wallace's book. I thought that was really great. That was a good one. But Making Time made my list. I think this is something, they're short chapters, and to walk us through, hey, how we have been shaped through productivity and the machine. What does it mean to be human? And then some practices of how to be creative in this world and be human. It's a fantastic little book by Maria Bowler. I really love Making Time.
We got that book in our store, and I have to admit, I'm just like this. It's stupid, but I thought, this is like a little self-help book to encourage people to get their priorities right or something. And I set it aside, and somebody else told me it was fantastic. And so then I picked it up and thought, oh my goodness, this is a much better book than I think I realized, or that the marketers had. It's profound. So thank you for naming that.
Yeah.
Hey, that Carrie Wallace book on creativity and invention has a blurb in the front by Patti Smith, the kind of Andy Warhol and punk rock person. And I thought that can't possibly be the same Patti Smith on the cover of a Christian book from Erdman's. And sure enough, you got Carrie and she are friends. So that's pretty cool too.
Yeah. Carrie was great. Yeah, good. Lori, number 9.
Yeah, I'm going to preface this one by saying I had never read anything by this author who is immensely popular. And that's one of the reasons I had never read anything by her, because they were books that I'm not typically drawn to. But someone said, I think you would really like her fiction. And so I read The Signature of All Things by Elizabeth Gilbert.
Yeah.
And do you know this one, Brian?
It's one of my all-time favorite novels.
Okay, I knew nothing about it going in. And so it's the story of, it was catnip for me, because it kind of hits the sort of science, nature, botanical. She studies moss in this, but then also this sort of themes of faith and doubt and belief and mission. And what does that look like when those sort of things combust together? What does that look like? And so I thought it was a profound novel. Maybe not for everyone, but Brian, I'm glad to hear it's one of your favorites. I think that one of the things I have to appreciate about Elizabeth Gilbert is it seems like when she does something, she goes whole hog. When you think of books like Eat, Pray, Love and the story behind that, or her most recent one, I think it's called All the Way to the River, which I haven't read and have heard not great reviews about, but it's sort of this sort of theme of her just sort of throwing herself all into something. And I think what I loved about this novel is you could tell she had not just done her research, but it was almost like she had just embodied the characters in this book in a profound way. And really, it made it, I really loved this one. I thought it was great. And it was a really thick
I don't
novel.
think it's given too much away, but in the story...
Yeah, don't give too much away.
She ends up becoming, marries a missionary for a while, and then she's interested in science questions, like doing academic articles at the time of Darwin as a woman, a scientist. And then she's a contemporary
of Darwin. Yeah.
The quote really is from one of the title is from one of the German mystics, the pietist who had this kind of encounter with God that was the signature of all things. It is an amazing book. Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, I think so. Joshua, you know this about me. Just like faith and doubt is a pretty consistent struggle for me throughout my life. And I think it was so good for me to read something that was very much from the perspective of someone who is, rational, reason, science, but who had to face up against the mystical and the some ways magical or the unimaginable. And what do you do with that? And just to read the story of someone who felt like me in a lot of ways. I mean, I'm not doing the same thing she was doing, but just felt familiar in a way that was good for me this year.
Excellent. Good pick.
It's thick too. I mean, it's really entertaining.
Which is my favorite. I love really, really big novels. They're my favorite.
Epic.
Yeah.
All right, Byron, number 9.
Well, I'd love to talk about Elizabeth Gilbert and her big magic book, which blew me away, and a book on men that she wrote about gender issues, which was amazing.
I have that one on my list. I got it after I got this one because I was like, I need to read that. And
book, man, she's a writer, and that Eat, Pray, Love. Like, I think a lot of people sort of look down their noses at her because they think that was cheesy or something.
I did.
I thought it was very well written, and I'm
adding it to my list. I'm adding it to my list because I read 2 of her novels this year and loved them both.
Oh, good. Well, I'm going to change gears here because this is not too mystical and it's not fiction, but I read a little bit of theology. I don't really dive too much into the heady theology as such. And this isn't exactly theology, but there's a guy I really respect named Michael Goheen. Goheen is a Newbegin scholar, and he's co-written a book by a mentor of mine, Al Wolters, added a chapter to Creation Regained, which is a book that was formative for me. But Goheen has moved out around Tempe, Arizona, and has helped form a network of churches to help people particularly understand the gospel in a missional way that relates particularly to faith and work, taking your faith into the marketplace and living out your vocation in the so-called secular world. And so they kind of do that out there with a network of churches that both have a missional sort of sense of vision, but particularly this integrating faith and work stuff. And so I like their work. They understand we're sort of in exile. And so there's this sort of countercultural mood to it as well. And he has this training center. Well, the material that he teaches in the training center is captured in this new book called The Core of the Christian Faith. The Core of the Christian Faith. The subtitle is Living the Gospel for the Sake of the World. And it's the kind of material that he teaches out there at this kind of resource center that's equipping churches to live the gospel, to have a kind of a missional encounter with the world, to understand that the gospel is a story and that the story has as its sort of biblical rhetoric, the kingdom. So it's a kingdom story. When you hear a title like The Core of the Christian Faith, I was afraid it was going to be like systematic theology, the nature of God and the nature of the atonement and the nature of sin and the nature of hope or whatever. And it's not. It's about the narrative of the unfolding drama of the gospel coming to earth and how we can kind of teach that in a way that can empower people to live more faithfully in the contemporary culture we find ourselves in. So there's a little bit of Newbegin kind of stuff in there. I just think it's profound, and it's one of my favorite kind of introductions to the Christian faith.
Yeah. Michael Goheen is fantastic. That's a great pick. I think that he has a lot of great things to say to people that are trying to actually embody this faith that we claim to have, and not just name it in words, but actually live it out. Yeah, he does a great job. A great pick. Yeah. I think I love books about story and how story influences culture. I love movies and the movie making and what that is. So I read things like Everything is a Story by Caitlin Curtis, which was fantastic. Daniel Schwabayer's book called The God of Story is another really, really good one. What does it look like to live through metaphor and to work through metaphor, especially when we're talking about teachings in the church? But my favorite book about that was We Tell Ourselves Stories by Alyssa Wilkinson. And so this one is really, it's the subtitle is Joan Didion and the American Dream Machine. And so she takes a look at Hollywood, traces that history of Hollywood into politics as well through the work of Joan Didion. I haven't read much of Joan Didion in the past. I read The Year of Magical Thinking, which was a profound book about grief, which I was like bowled over by. But I haven't read a lot of her Hollywood stuff. And so really just to walk through her life, the life of Hollywood, and how the profound impact of politics happened through the stories that we tell, the culture that we have made because we are telling stories all the way through. I love this book by Alyssa Wilkinson, We Tell Ourselves Stories.
Do you know who she is, Lori? Is that somebody that you know, Alyssa Wilkinson?
I mean, I know she's the movie reviewer. I don't know her personally, but have always loved her work, doing movie reviews for the Times.
She's with the New Yorker now, or the New York Times now.
Yeah, she's been in the New York Times for a while.
Yeah, critics in America.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Both of you, I'm so sorry. I'm here alone. And I have both of my dogs, and I'm on the third floor. And so one of them is asking to go out, even though he does not need to go out. So that's why I have myself muted part of the time.
You're good. Don't worry about it.
My next,
number 8.
My next book is Heating and Cooling by Beth Ann Fennelly. Heating and Cooling. It's 52 micro memoirs. And I love this. It's incredibly readable. I think I read it in an hour and a half. She was the poet laureate of, I think, Mississippi, perhaps, and teaches at the University of Mississippi. Just fabulous, fabulous writing. Unforgettable stories, just super clever. And yeah, again, just so readable. I love a really tight storytelling. I love giving ourselves really tight constraints and limitations. I think that really good work comes out when we do that sort of thing. I had a professor in college, an art professor in college, who he required us to work with only 2 colors for an entire semester. And It was, you could use whatever medium you wanted, but it was 2 colors. That's what you could use. And I think I did some of my best artwork during that time. And that's the same sort of thing that I see in something like this, where it's poetic, but also just, they're micro memoirs. So they're just very short stories that she's telling about very ordinary things like, very ordinary things like heating and cooling.
Who is the author again?
Yeah, Beth Ann Fennelly. So fennel, like the fennel bulb.
Wow. That sounds fascinating. Sounds great. Good. Byron.
Well, this is a book that it means a lot to me, in part because I knew the guy's father in high school. His mother was one of my best friends in high school. This is going back into the 70s. She died of cancer, and he talks about that a little bit. His name is Jared Ayers, all grown up now, of course, but I'm an old guy and knew his parents. Jared is a Presbyterian pastor in Florida, went to Lancaster Bible College, which maybe you know in central Pennsylvania there, Lori. And Jared Ayers wrote this book called You Can Trust a God with Scars. He tells about being sort of raised fairly strict, fairly conservative theologically, dispensational, that sort of stuff, and yet realized that he loved the culture of the 80s, rock music and film, and was finding in rock music and others just sort of a language to talk about the brokenness of the world. He went through this experience where his own mother died as a boy, and he just was trying to struggle with doubt. His brother had drug addictions and so forth. And he just finds out throughout this whole narrative that you can trust a God as revealed in the Bible, because that God has scars. That God knows our pain, knows our brokenness, and makes a good case for an apologetic, not on proving the resurrection happened or arguing about the faith, but just telling the story of God's love for the broken. He uses a lot of pop culture allusions, a lot of film studies stories, a lot of examples of meeting people in coffee shops and stuff. It's sort of a quintessential, Gen X kind of writer. And yet he's a solid theological pastor, trained also at Western Theological Seminary with Wynne Collier, who runs the Eugene Peterson Center up there on the Christian imagination. So he's an imaginative, creative writer. And this is for people that are maybe trying to figure out what's it all about. Is there any reason for existence? Why do we live? And is there a God that cares? And he says, yes, you can trust a God with scars. The subtitle is Faith and Doubt for the Searching Soul. And I think it was one of my favorite books. I keep asking myself, do I like it just because I know his family? And I've heard about this kid and his troubled brother. And if I didn't know them, would I still love the book as much? And I read it a second time, really trying hard not to put my own personal affections for his family in here. And I am absolutely sure this would be a book you could give to anybody who's interested in doubt or struggle or pain, and yet loves a good story that has to do with film or pop culture, stuff like that. Yeah, it's a good read.
Yeah, that subtitle sounds like Lori.
Faith and Doubt. Right there you go.
It's Perfect. I heard incredible things about that book, and I haven't read it yet, but I've
It's
heard really,
very
really good things.
compelling and published
Yeah.
by Nav Press of all people. Yep,
Yeah.
good stuff.
Yeah. Hey, another theme I think in this world here, we have climate change. The world is getting crazier all the time. The weather is getting crazier. Isolation, grief, loneliness, trying to figure out what does it mean to be human. All of these things together. I read a Brian McLaren's new novel, The Last Voyage, which was really good. Sci-fi look at what he did through the themes of life after doom, which was one on my top 10 last year. But this isn't my number 8. My number 8 is actually a novel that I read, which is Wild Dark Shore by Charlotte McGonaghy. Wild Dark Shore is a fantastic, fantastic book. It's just riveting from start to finish. The ending really made me angry. And so I didn't want this book to be, I was like, after reading the ending, I'm like, I'm done. I don't like this. But it just stuck with me. I read it earlier this year and it just won't let me go. There's a just beautiful figuring out like love gets stitched back into a family again. That I think that is the really the most beautiful thing in the midst of an isolated island, isolated family going through a lot of grief and struggle and pain, trying to figure out how to protect a seed bank so that we could actually have seeds through the world. And yeah, this book is fantastic. I love it. Wild Dark Shore.
That is also on my list, and I'll share why when I get there. What are we on, 7? My number 7 book is Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead. And, I was thinking, so I loved this book while I was reading it. Another really thick one. It was a Booker Prize finalist. And I thought about it later and I was like, why did I love this book so much? The story was great. It was a great story. She's a phenomenal storyteller, but her writing, I think, was just really singular. And I really love when you can find a novelist who is just a writer's writer. She went through the Iowa Writers Workshop. She's got the chops. And this became a pretty popular book. I saw it the year that it released. I was seeing it everywhere, and I just never picked it up until this year. And the writing was just off the charts. Sometimes I would go back and reread the way that she would describe something, her ability to craft a simile for something was just so good. And I think it takes real skill to do that. So I really loved this one, The Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead. And I'm not going to give anything really away about the plot, except for it's about a female pilot who tries to circle the world and circle the globe. And, but also, what happens to women who want to do extraordinary things and sort of the challenges that they face and the ways that failure becomes fodder for other people. And what do we do with that? So I love that one, The Great Circle.
Excellent.
And that came out a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah, I think it did. I think it came out, I'm not sure what year, but probably like 2019 maybe.
Yeah.
Looking.
My wife read that and really loved it.
Yeah.
And it was on my list for a while, and then I sort of forgot about it.
It didn't, people were like, I think you would really like this. But every time I read the synopsis, I was like, didn't sound super interesting to me. I don't know what it was about this year, though. I just picked it up, and it until about 3.5 weeks ago, it was on the top of my list.
Wow.
And it got toppled about 3.5 weeks ago.
I can't wait to hear what's next.
Well, it'll be, I probably put this one farther down in the pile than I should have. But anyway, we'll get there.
Nice.
I love books that are just so well written, and it's nice to hear that that's one of them. Good. Well, my next one is a book called Liturgies for Resisting Empire. We used that phrase a minute ago. It is by Kat Armas, who's a Latino writer, just a really passionate writer, really good writer. We've read her other books, of course. And this Litanies, I love the cover as well. It's got this really interesting drawing of a heart and flowers and grief. And I thought maybe it was going to be a book of litanies, of prayers and liturgies. There is some prayer and stuff in here, but it is more about why we need practices and liturgies of spirituality if we're going to be whole, happy people in the face of the persecutions of the empire. So the subtitle is Seeking Community, Belonging, and Peace in a Dehumanizing World. So what does it mean to be human in the midst of a world where empire and capitalism and everything else is just reducing everything to money and power? And there's got to be a way that we can bear witness against all that in a way that allows us to sort of break free. It is not primarily a polemic only about anti-empire themes in the Bible, although there is some of that. But a lot of it, again, it's just, what's it mean to belong? What's it mean to be a community? What's it mean to be human, like you were asking, Joshua? I just think this is an incredibly great book, really, really useful. One of my favorite books of the year. And it's sort of they call it in the back, they say a roadmap for decolonizing faith and life. And for some that know what that means, it's sort of, you get it. And even if this is unfamiliar to you, I think it's a good introduction to this whole conversation. She's a great writer, and I highly recommend this one.
I want to give that one a thumbs up as well. It's not on my list, but it was definitely up there for me.
Yep, not on my list, but definitely up there. It's in my 11 through 20, and it's a fantastic, fantastic read. I would just have probably two other books in my top 10 that are kind of anti-empire books, but I mean, any of them could have been interchanged because that's fantastic. I love Kat Armis's work. Again, a great conversation I had with her on Shifting Culture this year about that. It was really, really good. Well, my number 7, one of the things that I have found really fascinating for a long time and trying to wrap my head around is charisma, how charisma works, how it shapes us, how people wield it for good and for evil, and why some people have it, some people don't. Like, charisma has just been fascinating. And so I read a book called Spellbound by Molly Worthen. It's how charisma shaped American history from the Puritans to Donald Trump. It is a fascinating look at charisma, not just the ones that we think would have charisma, like these really the loudest, most extroverted type of people. There's a quiet charisma that people have that can draw people in. She goes through lots of stories all the way through, and I love that she actually hits on like 5 huge themes and times in American history, and how one age is a reaction to the next age, and how charisma plays a factor in actually moving us towards a different way, and a way that actually tears down institutions, or a way that, you know, builds up the individuals, and then the institutions come back in because we've had too much of the individuals. And it's just fascinating to see that, hey, this is just a pattern that has played out throughout our history. And we're at this age of the gurus and this crazy age of anti-institutionalism that we're living in. And it's just a pattern of what we've had in America. But Spellbound is fantastic, fantastic book.
You know, she recently came to Christian faith. Her earlier book was sort of an analysis of she called them the apostles of reason. Yeah. And she was not a follower of Christ as she was writing that book. Yeah. But as she came to understand deeper things about the religion that she was studying, she made a profession of faith. We just got to sell books with her, although I didn't myself go, but we provided the books for an event in Philadelphia just about 2 weeks ago with her, and we sold every book we sent, which rarely happens in a book event. But she was apparently fantastic with this sort of collaborative program in Philly about people getting along and working for the common good. So they loved her, and the feedback was that she was a fabulous person to be with. Yeah.
It was probably it was definitely one of my favorite conversations I've had on the podcast.
Well, you've had her on.
Yeah, I've had her on, and she was just fascinating all the way through. It was really good. She actually became a believer while she was writing this book. And so she, through correspondence with Tim Keller and someone else, she actually worked through everything. And so the correspondence of writing letters back and forth, which might come up later. All right, Lori.
It might come up later. It sounds like it might come up for a couple of us later.
It might.
This feels like a good segue to Sarah Billups' Nervous Systems, which came out in November. And I'm probably biased here because Sarah is a good friend of mine, but the subtitle is Spiritual Practices to Calm Anxiety in Your Body, the Church, and Politics. And I think, it is hard, Brian, like you were talking about earlier. It is hard to separate the book from the person that who suffered and warred and won to release this book. But I think that for me, what that says is we want people who don't just have charisma to write books and to be speaking into the public spaces. We want people who have scars. We want people who have walked through profound things in order to impart profound lessons to us. And I think this released, I think the day before Election Day, and which was so timely, because I do think we just are in a time of heightened anxiety in our world in every way. And so she is just offering some spiritual practices to calm that anxiety in some ways. And it's not trite. It could have been really trite, sort of do this and this and this. And it wasn't. Sarah opens up her own sort of closet and her own narrative, her own ways that she has wrestled with this in her own life and in her family and with individuals in her life. And so there's nothing trite about it. There's no sort of A plus B equals C about it. A plus B, 1 plus 1 equals 2. I don't know. There's none of that. It's not trite in any way.
Yep.
And Sarah's I think she's just a really good communicator. Really, she's very thoughtful. She's a good storyteller, very reflective. And yeah, I think this book is a gift to us, particularly in 2025, 2026, this sort of time.
Yeah.
Lori, a while ago, we were talking about our friends, the Smuckers, who own a quaint little bookstore in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Yep.
But they flew out to Portland to help promote the release of this book, right? So they know her too.
Yeah. We're all a part.
All the way across the country to help promote a book. And they said, well, we love her so much. It is on my stack. As a bookseller, I'm always reading books and doing my weekly book notes of books I'm trying to sell to people that I think other people would find helpful. And then I've got my books that I want to read for myself. So I'm reading things like kind of for the store, for my job. I have that on my own stack and I haven't started it yet, but I respect her so much. And I really am hoping to get to that before the end of the year. Am I right that it looks not only at sort of personal anxieties, but also sort of the systemic anxiety because of the politics of the day?
Yeah, I mean, it's called Nervous Systems, which I just think is such a brilliant title. Nervous Systems. So these sort of like collective anxiety, the way that we store it in our collective bodies, the way that we feed it, the way that we impart it to our children, the way that we are it's the sort of connective tissue of our world in a lot of ways. So I think it's not just sort of spiritual memoir about her own anxiety. It really is sort of this body of anxiety that we exist within this. And so, it's great. It's really great.
That's good. That's good. I love she gets to holy indifference. And I think the holy indifference is something that we all need to get to in her as she walked through the Ignatian prayer exercises. It was really helpful. The conversation I had with Sarah was like so tender and beautiful. It was a gift to me to be able to talk to her about this. And, after we were finished, we talked about you, Lori, and how awesome you are. So we talked about you too. So Sarah, Nervous Systems, fantastic. It's in my 11 through 20. It's a fantastic, fantastic book. All right, Byron.
And I've got to get to it. I am absolutely eager to read that. Thank you for sharing about that. Well, look, we've talked about sort of the systems of the culture and some of the problems of a empire age and so forth. I hope I'm not stepping on the toes of your listeners here, Joshua. But as we think about culture shifts, one of the things that has happened in the last, it's been going on for decades, but particularly come to the fore in the last decade, is this rise of Christian nationalism. And I've read probably 20 books on the history of the rise of Christian nationalism and what we do about that. one of the most amazing books that I have read, and I enjoyed it as much as it makes me mad, is a book called The Violent Take It by Force. It is
Yeah.
by Matthew Taylor, and it is about this movement that some call the New Apostolic Reformation.
Hmm.
People who, out of the tutelage of Peter Wagner back in the day at Fuller, had a charismatic renewal, began to emphasize words of knowledge and this sort of stuff. Matthew Taylor grew up in some of that world, so he's not utterly against supernatural experiences. He is a Christian, but he's now come to understand that the major players in the New Apostolic Reformation ended up all supporting President Trump and the campaign to storm the Capitol on January 6th.
Yeah.
Many of the main players of that movement were there. I didn't even know they were at the building. They weren't in the building, but they were at the building offering prayers and so forth. And he said of all the sort of apostolic prophecies around Trump, that day of January 6th, the number one Bible verse that was on Twitter floating around was this peculiar verse, "The violent take it by force," from the Gospels of Jesus, which they, of course, misinterpret, I'm sure. It's kind of an anti-empire verse when you study it carefully, talking about what the Roman Empire was doing, that the violent take it by force. They were claiming this is the way of God. The subtitle is "The Christian Movement That Is Threatening Our Democracy."
Mm.
Every chapter is the history of a different person in this movement, this new apostolic movement. So it isn't the old Christian right of Jerry Falwell and those kind of guys, but it's spiritual warfare and praise music as power, and sort of the genesis of this apostolic reformation and the networks of people that are passing around these prayer
Mm.
circles. One important part of the book, I'll just say this and then I'll shut up about it, but one important part is, of course, Paula White became a member of the White House staff and was working in the White House. And they had a weekly prayer of prophecies and apostolic utterances and stuff out of the White House. Whether that's even legal in terms of church and state stuff, I don't know. But it's curious that this prayer network that she developed while working in the White House then became the prayer chain and the Rolodex that got people to come to January 6th. So there's absolute complicity and involvement in the craziness of the conspiracy theories and the weird stuff, the QAnon stuff coming
Yeah.
out of this allegedly Christian renewal movement. It
Yeah.
is a riveting book that I couldn't put down, and it's written with some degree of affection as he interviews each of the major players, some
Mm.
of whom you've heard of and maybe some you have not. But this is just a propulsive account of all that stuff. It was one of
Nice.
my unforgettable books of the year.
Wow. That's good. I was looking through and I was like, man, another Christian nationalism book. I mean, I've read a lot of them recently. I'm like, I don't know if I want to do another one, but it sounds fascinating. It's something I probably need to pick up, The Violent Take It by
It's a
Force.
new angle
Yeah.
and an
Yeah.
important angle in the kind of Pentecostal, neo-Pentecostal movement and
Yeah.
prayer warriors and demonic spirits over nations and stuff. It's really worth knowing about.
Yeah. Great. Well, my number 6, I read some really fascinating, great books on really how we got to our moment today, our moment of racism, violence against people in America, all sorts of things. Tremaine Lee's A Thousand Ways to Die, which is the true cost of violence on Black life in America, a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. That was a fantastic book. Making It Plain by Drew Hart. I just loved how pacifism and things can actually help us in there, and the Black church tradition can help us in our day and age, and takes the history. But actually my favorite here of that sort of book that actually he goes all the way upstream, which is Malcolm Foley's The Anti-Greed Gospel. I just love this because he goes upstream to say, hey, greed is the root of racism, and the love of money is the root of our militarism and our capitalist machine, that we have to have more and more productivity in our life. He just names it clearly, and in a way where actually haven't thought of before. I think it's just a very articulate, clear naming of something, a systemic sin that we really have to root out to be able to see flourishing in this world, that the dehumanization of this world can actually move into a different direction of love and belonging and community, so that we could actually end violence and dehumanization. So I loved The Anti-Greek Gospel by Malcolm Foley.
Absolutely. One of the best books of the year, no doubt.
I haven't read it, so I will get it. Put it on my list for 26. Are
After
we on?
that, he's a good guy.
Yeah.
Are we at book 5? Is that where
We are at book 5. We're at number 5.
Wild Dark Shore.
Nice.
So this is my third Charlotte McConaughey book, and she does not miss. She does not miss. So if you like climate fiction at all, that's sort of this place where she kind of exists. Once There Were Wolves was one of my favorite novels, is one of my favorite novels of all time. And Wild Dark Shore is up there now. Like you said, it takes place in a remote island, southern New Zealand, Antarctic island, and it's about a seed bank. And yeah, it is a profound novel. At its heart, it's a mystery novel. It's a thriller in a sense. It's very propulsive, but it is really about love and the things that we do to save the things and people that we love. And I needed a book that gave me some hope this year, and I was really sad by the ending. But when I thought about it, I thought, it is a book about love and the things we do for love. And so in that sense, it was a very satisfying ending for me. So Wild Dark Shore, Charlotte McConaughey.
Wow. Both
Great
of you
pick,
have
Corey.
that listed, huh?
Yeah.
I've been afraid to read it because I thought it would just bum me out. I thought it would be too discouraging.
No. Read it.
No.
Read it.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah. Good. It's on my list. This is absolutely random, but have you heard of Barry Lopez, who's a nature writer, ecologist that died a year or so ago?
No.
I read a collection of his essays this year, and some of it was set in Antarctica. When you mentioned this island down off the coast of New Zealand, he would go there and live for the longest time. He also lived in Alaska and wrote books about wolves and stuff. But that was one of the most amazing books I've read all year, is this collection of essays by this travel naturalist. He's written some fiction as well.
Is there a pine cone on the cover that's kind of like...
No, but that's another of his books. There is a book of his that has like a woodcut in the front.
Yes. Okay. I do know him. I think I read that when I was writing the understory. And I really loved it.
Probably. Yeah. Which, by the way, was one of my favorite books of a couple of years ago.
Brian, thank you.
A great book. I've reviewed it a couple of times at Book Notes.
Thank you.
Well, look, my next book, I'm going to move out of the fiction realm. You guys are doing such good fiction. I should be naming more fiction. But this is kind of a report. It's not quite a memoir because it's written by somebody else. So it is a memoir as such. But it is a memoir of the journalist who enters Honduras to tell the story of an organization founded by a guy named Kurt Van Beek. Kurt Van Beek was a sociology professor at Calvin College in Michigan and was doing some mission trips to the South and stuff to Latin America, and ends up, the short version is, that moved there to do like a semester abroad in the midst of one of the roughest gang areas in this city in Honduras. While there, partnered with this dynamic, charismatic Christian leader there, and they decided they had to stop the violence, the gun violence and stuff in their community. And they realized that the complicity of all that was the cops, that the police wouldn't arrest people, that it was kind of organized crime stuff and drug stuff. And one thing led to another. And they started an institution to work for social justice, for systemic structural change in the way Honduras does its political work. Became sort of a little more than IJM, the International Justice Mission with Gary Hagen, although they consulted with Gary Hagen a bit to try to form this institution that was evangelical and deeply Christian, but working for broad systemic historic change. So the book about all that is called Bear Witness by Ross Halprin. the pursuit of justice in a violent land. I don't know if you've read Ghetto Side by Jill Lavoie, who's a book about urban violence in the United States and gun violence in urban cities. And she says Kurt Van Beek and Carlos Hernandez are possibly the bravest people in the world and among the true who truly understand how violence works.
Yeah.
So Halperin is this journalist that goes there and listens to these guys, hangs out with those guys, tells the book. It reads and unfolds like a thriller, like a crime novel. It's superbly reported. It is deeply Christian. They end up making some systemic changes and proposals of watching the police and accountability and stuff. That we could learn from in this country, the accountability stuff, which then leads them to political involvement. And then what happens when the political people that like your little project are actually pretty bad people themselves? Yeah. And what's it mean to sort of be righteous in the midst of this very complicated situation? They just helped organize a massive, friends of mine were just down there last week, a massive program helping to monitor elections in one of the most corrupt countries where elections have never gone well. And they had thousands of people trained well, doing very practical stuff to do reporting of a fair election in Honduras. And it was all because of this great organization. So I'm a big fan of this organization. Nick Wolterstorff, the theologian, is on their board. Big fan of this book. It tells the story. I couldn't put it down. It was hair-raising.
Yeah. Great book. I love this book.
You read it.
Yeah. I talked to Kurt Verbeek for the podcast, and man, the story was fantastic. Just actually the practical application of what justice really looks like on the ground, the really difficult gray areas that you have to walk in and walk through to see it come to flourish. It is fantastic. They made a proposal to the city of Chicago, do some things. Chicago just said, no, we're not going to have you do this. It's costly. People have to give away some power if they're going to actually deal with justice. And right now in America, we don't want to give away power. So we want to hold on to it for the detriment of our society, usually. So
you read everything, man. I
read a lot.
More great books than anybody I know, I think.
I read a lot. Well, my number 5, we're going back into a novel, but a middle grade novel that I absolutely loved. I just finished it 2 days ago, and it's on my list. It's a refugee novel set in World War II in Iran, The Teacher of Nomadland by Daniel Nayeri. Here you go. This is it. The Teacher of Nomadland by Daniel Nayeri. He won the National Book Award for children's fiction there. Man, I just love this as somebody who's worked with refugees, and to see actual Jewish refugees in this novel in the country of Iran, of how Muslims actually helped them, took them in, is something that we need right now. More stories like this of grace and love and mercy. It's a story of children walking to try and get to a train going over mountains, coming up, against different forces of World War II forces, German forces, seeing English soldiers. And really, at the core of it, the base of it, is how language can bring us together and how words and stories can actually unite us in a way where we can start to understand each other and move forward together and not be enemies. It's a fantastic, fantastic little book.
I considered putting that in.
I'm so thankful for Daniel Nayeri. Like, I'm like, you are a national. You're not even a national. I don't even like to use that word. You are a treasure. We need to protect you at all costs, because what you put into the world, especially for kids, I think of that Madeleine L'Engle quote, like, if it's too hard to write for adults, write it for kids. And I just think of Daniel Nayeri is just doing that so well.
He's amazing.
Yeah. I'm so thankful for him.
Splendid. So good.
Yeah. Number 4 is Monsters. Are you guys familiar with this one? By Claire Dederer. And What Do We Do with Great Art by Bad People? And so I think every maker, writer, artist probably needs to read this book. She she writes through. I'll go to the. She writes through these makers of great art in our world, in our time, and throughout history, who just had really problematic. I mean, you think of like Roman Polanski, Woody Allen, just people who had just had really problematic personal lives. But she doesn't. I feel like this book could have been really pedantic. It could have been like, look at them, don't do what they do. But instead, she turns the spotlight on ourselves. Like, how are we complicit in the wrongdoing that happens, but also we are not perfect either, and we are putting our best work into the world while also making bad decisions, doing things that if we could look back at ourselves, or if other people look back at us in the future, would probably find problematic as well. And so it was a very self-aware book, and I really appreciated that in a lot of ways, because I think it felt like a very vulnerable book to put into the world. And so I just really appreciated her work in this one. And it got amazing reviews. I don't know why I didn't read it until this past year. I read it because Sarah told me. Sarah's been talking about it since it released, and I just had never picked it up until this year. So
that's where I heard it. Yeah. I think she recommended it.
Yeah, she tells everyone about it.
Yeah.
I've got it in the store, and I read a couple of reviews that were spectacular, but I never picked it up. I just didn't get around to it. So I'm glad you named it. That is an important book, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It felt like it was saying the quiet part out loud to me. It felt like we're all thinking that, but none of us are really saying it. And I'm just so thankful that she did. Brian, I'm sorry. I interrupted you. What did you...
do you know anything about the author?
I don't. I know nothing about her. No.
All right. Number 4, Byron.
Well, speaking of problematic authors, problematic artists, this could be, I mean, my top couple. It's hard to decide which is 2 and which is 3. This is certainly one of my favorite books of the year. It is a book called Rags of Light, which is a line from Leonard Cohen. And the subtitle is Leonard Cohen and the Landscape of the Biblical Imagination. It's by my friend Brian Walsh. Married to Sylvia Keysmont, a biblical scholar. They own an organic farm south of Toronto. And he's a pop culture maven as well as an anti-empire biblical scholar. They wrote a book on Romans. And they wrote a book on Colossians about resisting empire. The Romans one, by the way, is one of my all-time favorite books called Disarming Romans. Romans Disarmed. This is not a fan biography. It is not a study of the life of Leonard Cohen, although he talks about Cohen a bit. Jewish writer, singer-songwriter, poet, novelist, activist in some parts of his life, a mess in many parts of his life. And he looks at the lyrics, both the poetry and the songs, and puts them in conversation with biblical texts. And it is not cheesy. It is not simplistic. Brian is one of my favorite biblical exegetes, knows the scriptures as well as anybody I know. And he brings the Bible into dialogue with the lyrics of Leonard Cohen. It is absolutely spectacular, particularly around themes of lament and protest. So there's a lot of the minor prophets and the hope of Jeremiah and stuff in here, as you would expect in a dialogue with a Jewish songwriter. So Leonard Cohen took his Jewish faith seriously. And Brian is trying to figure out what to make of that and looking at his work and putting it in dialogue with scripture texts. He's not trying to pretend that Leonard Cohen was a Christian. And he's not trying to say everything he wrote was wonderful, but it's a kind of conversation around the Bible and the poetry of Leonard Cohen. So this is one of my favorite books of the year.
It sounds fascinating. Sounds just deeply, deeply fascinating. Something right up my alley. Yeah.
And you want to know something? I don't even like Leonard Cohen that much. Like the main reason I was interested in this is because I like Brian so much and would read anything he does. He wrote a book like this around the artist Bruce Cockburn years ago called Kicking in the Darkness. And again, not a fan biography, but a dialogue around the biblical texts. And that too is one of my all-time favorite books. And I thought, well, I'll see what he has to say about Cohen, even though I'm not interested in Leonard Cohen. I couldn't put it down. I read it cover to cover and then picked it up again and read it more slowly a second time. So this was Rags of Light.
Excellent. Yeah, my number 4 is actually a history of Christianity and tells the paradox of Christianity, the ugliness and the beauty through the buildings that have made Christianity. So 12 Churches by Fergus Butler Galley is here. Like, he tells the story of like Christ Church in Zanzibar, who actually made the altar on top of the whipping posts that used to, run with blood in the streets because of the slave trade. But now the body and blood of Christ is given out at that same spot. Like, so the beauty and the ugliness of this world, the paradox of Christianity, it is absolutely fascinating to go through these church buildings. So he goes into, the building in Birmingham, Alabama, when the young school children are shot and killed, that really helped with the civil rights movement and propelled really the actually living out of the values of Christ. There he goes into the Church of the Nativity. One of my favorite stories is when a Muslim sheik came and took over that they didn't touch the Church of the Nativity, kept it there. But this Muslim sheik basically said they're going to put anybody to death who makes molhia, which is like stewed jute leaves. And it's just a like stewed jute leaf soup. And I've had molhia in the Middle East, and it's the worst food I've had. So I could see why somebody would say you're going to be put to death if you're going to make this. But this book has so many incredible stories in it. Great history. Fergus Butler Galley. It's hilarious. It's good. Has paradox. It's beautiful. I loved it. 12 Churches. Fergus Butler Galley.
And every chapter is not only a different building, but kind of a different theme: sex or violence or conquest or entrepreneurship. Churches in the Dominican Republic, Canterbury, a church in the Far East. I mean, it's all over the world. That is a spectacular book.
Yeah,
I
that one's going top to my list to read, because that sounds
really good.
Right up my alley. Number 3 is The Names by Florence Knapp, and you're probably seeing this everywhere right now. Basically, briefly, not a spoiler, it sort of plays with the question, does our name change who we are? And as someone who was named one name for 3 days before my parents changed my name to something different, I find that really interesting. This is a very interesting concept to me. And so it sort of plays with these ideas of fate and nature versus nurture. And it had, I think, one of the most satisfying endings of a book that I read this year. The whole time I was reading it, I was thinking, how is she going to land this plane in a way that is not trite or simplistic, that actually sticks with you? And I think that she nailed it. And I'm not going to say much more than that, but I do think it is a really, really beautiful, life affirming. There are some difficult, so trigger warning, it deals with domestic violence, and it does not play lightly with that. But I think it was, in the end, such a life affirming novel, and I loved it. Yeah. The Names by Florence Knapp.
So good. I think identity and name is fascinating to me. So that looks great. Haven't read it yet. So
it does sound fantastic. Yeah. Oh, I got my good books cut out for me here. This is really inspiring to me. Thank you, guys.
All right, number 3, Byron.
Well, my number 3 book is one of the great moments of our year this past year was hosting Jeff Chu.
Oh, I love that book.
We brought him into York and wrote this memoir called Good Soil. Jeff Chu, just to give the backstory of the book, is a gay Christian who has some struggles and doubts about his faith, wrote a wonderfully gracious memoir about driving around the country called Does Jesus Really Love Me? And he went and asked people, even that God hates fags, fundamentalists and left, right, and center, all different kind of people, and would hang out with folks to say, do you think God loves me as a gay person? I'm trying to figure this out myself, and I want to know what you think. And so it's sort of a travelogue memoir, but also sort of a report on the front lines of Christianity's culture wars and what everybody is sort of like behind the scenes. It was a great book. Anyway, Jeff decided, he was a travel writer, writing in New York and Manhattan, Asian American, gay, his parents being sort of conservative theologically on that question, wouldn't come to his wedding, of course. But he decides in midlife that he needs to go to seminary. So he goes to Princeton. Now, Princeton Theological Seminary, some people know, have this program called the farminary instead of a seminary, a farminary, where
Yep.
they grow agriculture, kind of a Wendell Berry-esque sort of thing, founded by a Mennonite guy named Nate Stuckey, who says we're going to learn to love the land, and that's how we're going to do our theology as we become farmhands, as we grow crops and seeds and all that sort of stuff. Well, he gets a new outfit to go to the farminary because he's such an urbane city kid. He knows nothing about growing things, and it's just sort of funny the way he does that. So it is a study and a memoir of him going to seminary, but more so working as a farmhand. So
Mm,
there's nature writing, there's agriculture stuff, there's beautiful stories about animals, about
yeah.
cooking. His mom's love language is cooking. So there's a lot
Yeah.
about Asian American cooking and Asian American culture. And even though his mom wouldn't come to the wedding, she would come and cook for them,
Mm,
gave chopsticks to her husband, which was a big deal in their culture. So it's about race and Asian American culture. It's about theology and going to seminary, what it means to learn to love, what it means to be family, what it means to cook for others, and to find a vocation when he doesn't really know quite what he's going to do with
mm,
this seminary degree. Good soil, the education of an accidental farmhand. I have to just tell you this real quick. When we brought him to York, a couple of days before, he had been with Barbara Brown Taylor, who
yeah.
interviewed him. And then a couple of days before that, he was with Barbara Rankel at one of the great bookstores, Ann Patchett's bookstore in Nashville. And then he was with Jamie Smith in Grand Rapids. And I thought,
Yeah.
holy smokes, you got like 3 or 4 major writers interviewing you in very
Yeah.
prominent places. And now you're coming and he says, yeah, I just want you to interview me. I don't want to give a talk about the book. Just ask me questions. And so I'm thinking, Barbara Brown Taylor and others have done this with him. Kate Bowler has done it with him. Jamie Smith has done it with him. And it's like, who am I? And we had a blast and we talked together. And it was a really nice
Mm,
author event. And I adore this book, Good Soil, for about a dozen different reasons. It's very nicely done.
yeah. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful book. It just missed my list. It was number 11 for me. It's
Oh,
so good. I just love at the beginning. He's talking about circular storytelling and how it's storytelling from the East, from his Chinese culture, as opposed to linear storytelling that we're used to. And this is a book. As I was reading it, I literally, this is the first time this has happened. I literally threw it across the room because it was so good. Like I was so like, it is a fantastic book. I don't do that very often. Throw a book across the room because it's so good, but this one is great. And the conversation I had with him on shifting culture was great. So go back and listen to the Jeff Chu podcast. Yeah, I'm not Barbara Brown Taylor, but we had a good conversation. So it's good. All right. My number 3. I think you might have this a little bit. So I won't talk too much about it, Lori, but my number 3 is The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. I can't really see this on my phone, but I actually got it from the library, and so I don't have a hard copy with me right now. But it is a fantastic, actually, a novel told in a series of letters and correspondence through this woman's life. It reminded me, I read Insane for the Light, Ronald Royal Heiser's new book and his trilogy of spirituality for life, and his spirituality at the end was basically becoming transparent enough to let the light shine through in old age and just be gracious and surrender. It's an incredible book. But this book reminded me of that, and it told it through a story of figuring it out. Like, how do I become transparent again and let the hardness of life actually start to peel away? And so I could get to who I really am and try to connect with the people that have been hard for me to connect in my life. It's really beautiful writing, incredible correspondence. Made me want to write letters and just be a letter writer. And then that's all I need to do is just write letters to people over and over again. It was a fantastic novel. I love it. The Correspondent.
All right, my number 2 is Circle of Hope by
Nice.
Eliza Griswold. Oof, this was a journey for me, friends.
Yeah.
I grew up in southeastern Pennsylvania, right outside of Philadelphia, and so it was. This is about a story of a church in Philadelphia and sort of the the undoing of the church. The author did not know when she was walking into this sort of immersive journalistic experience with this church. It sort of witnesses the unraveling of a church in Philadelphia, a church that cares about justice, a church that cares about issues in the world that many might term as a more progressive church. And yeah, it sort of witnesses the unraveling of this body, the unraveling of various leaders in the body, the unraveling of theology, the changing of some doctrines, some and just the ways that sort of like decimates this church. And I think I read it, and it landed so heavy on me for so many reasons. I'm not going to get into all of them, but I think the thing that stuck with me the most about this book is we hear these stories about, I think, more conservative churches. Just they're a dime a dozen these days of churches unraveling because of power dynamics or abuse and things like that. And I think I oftentimes see a lot of people coming out of those environments thinking, well, progressivism is surely we will find the, the way to nirvana or perfection or something in these more progressive places. And the reality is, like, goodness is not found in either conservative or progressive. It's not found on these sides. It's found in laying down our power. It's found in humility. It's found in being humble enough to say I'm wrong, but also humble enough to change when we need to change, when there are people in our lives who, press on us in gentle and faithful ways to move us toward change. And so it was a heartbreaking read, and not one that I would really want to put on my top 10 list, but I think it really is kind of a necessary read for a lot of us in the church today, because I think rarely do we have this sort of very immersive front row seat that this woman had to this church just really falling apart. So yeah, it's not really a hopeful book, even though it's called Circle of Hope. That's the name of the church. It's not a very hopeful book, but I think for me, it was giving me hope in a time where I feel a lot of complex feelings about the church in general. And it was just giving me hope that once again, we know this. Life and goodness and beauty is not found in domination. It's not found in empire. It is not found in asserting our rights over other people. It is not found in creating the biggest or the best of anything. It's found in laying our lives down.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was number 2 for me.
Did you read that, Joshua?
Yeah, it was my number 2 last year. It's an incredible book.
I think I read it. I put it on my list this year. I've been like avoiding it. For various reasons. I've been avoiding it. And I think you putting it on your list, I was like, okay, I know that you like good books and that you're not going to point me in the wrong direction. So I added it.
It was one of my favorite books last year as well. I preached at that church once.
Yeah.
And knew some of the people involved.
Me too.
Circle of Hope was a Brethren in Christ church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, what was curious is what you shared there, Lori, about vulnerability and giving your life away and laying down your power. Of the different little house churches they had, everyone would agree with that.
Yes.
They were all calling each other to do that.
Yes.
And in the name of this sort of commitment to vulnerability and sharing and justice, they beat each other up. It was just a horrific situation. And I know some of those folks. And what a book it was. It was quite a story. I hear you. I should reread that. It's out in paperback now.
Yeah. I think one of the things, I'm glad you brought that up, of this sort of like, they would all agree with that, and yet they were beating themselves down. We're at a Brethren in Christ church, and I see just goodness there. Like, it feels like such a good place for us. But there is that reality that we have blind spots, that I have blind spots. And there are ways that I am complicit in, go back to monsters. Like, there are ways that I'm complicit in terrible things that I cannot see myself. And the only way that we're able to walk in wholeness is to to walk vulnerably and to open ourselves up to criticism, and even if it's painful, even if it means great loss. And so I'm not saying I'm good at that in any way, but this book, it somehow, as hopeless as it was, it somehow did give me a little margin of hope.
Yeah.
And Eliza Griswold is such a great journalist. She wrote a book about the Middle East. She wrote a book about fracking in Western Pennsylvania.
Oh my gosh, that book, the book about fracking. Yes, she's fabulous.
It's so good. Yes, that was I was so privileged to be able to talk to Eliza about the book and there, but like it was such an honor to talk to her. She's such a great thinker, journalist, so she's fantastic. Yeah. All right, Byron, number 2.
Oh man, this is a big, thick book, and it's really complicated, but I can explain it very simply. It is called The Last Supper.
I really wanted to read that. Yeah.
Paul Elie wrote a book years ago called The Life You Save May Be Your Own. It's about 4 Roman Catholic writers, Flannery O'Connor and Walker Percy and Dorothy Day and Thomas Merton. And so it weaves together the narratives of these 4 important mid-20th century Catholic writers. He's Roman Catholic. This is a study of art in the 1980s that is what he calls crypto-religious. And he makes the case that there was this massive wave of literature, poetry, modern art, particularly Andy Warhol, who went to church every week, and rock music that were dealing with Christian themes, overtly Christian or cryptically Christian. Some of them were not Christians, but they still wrote about Christianity all the time because they couldn't escape it. And it weaves together from the art world, like Andy Warhol, to the rock and roll world. You think of U2, but of course they weren't even cryptic about it; they were out and out. But U2 coming into knowledge. Czeslaw Milosz, poets and novelists. The fatwa against Salman Rushdie. All the kind of stuff that was happening in the literature world, in the poetry world, in the rock and roll world, in the journalism world, in the fashion world, and how many people were uniquely Christian in the middle of that, or at least dealing with Christian themes. I just thought this was brilliant.
Yep.
He looks at The Last Temptation of Christ being made, a movie by Martin Scorsese, which of course looked at the humanity of Christ. Of course, the Christian right protested it even before they saw it, saying it was heretical and blasphemy. So there's all this kind of culture war stuff beginning to happen. The book opens with a famous scene in which Saturday Night Live, Sinead O'Connor tears up a picture of the Pope.
Yeah.
And so that's the beginning. It happens at the very beginning of the 90s. And that's the beginning of the story. It looks at Bob Dylan's conversion with Slow Train Coming, and then walks you through everything that happened in that decade. So yeah. What a book. The Last Supper. It also looks at the AIDS epidemic that began to happen and the protest movements of the people against the way gays were mistreated. People that had AIDS were mistreated in New York, and ACT UP and some of those groups were deeply religious and protesting even at churches. So yeah, religion in the culture wars and pop culture and high art in the 1980s. Fascinating.
Yeah. It's on my list. I really wanted to get to it. Really excited about this book.
Oh, it is spectacular.
Yeah. So excited to read that one. I've read a lot of work around Palestinian issues this year, and I think that's a big theme in this world is the genocide in Gaza, what is happening, how there's just a horrific dehumanization that is happening with Palestinians. I thought Layla King's Daughters of Palestine, her memoir going through 4 generations of Palestinian Christians, and it was just a phenomenal read. Great. Omar Al-Akkad's One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This really is just a great skewering of the left and the right, and how really words are not enough. We have to move from yes we can to yes we will. Is this really like, hey, we're going to be against this someday. Let's actually work towards some flourishing. The one I really want to highlight, since number 2 on my list, is Munther Isaac's Christ in the Rubble. And so Munther is, he's a pastor, theologian, Bethlehem Bible college, and yeah, they have in the Church of the Nativity, as we talked about. I talked to Fergus Butler Galley about the Church of the Nativity, but now they have the altar there is baby Jesus in the rubble, and he's still in the rubble. And I think going through the history of Israel, Palestine, the land, theology of the lands within this book as well, which is really important to tell. I think he goes through the history really well and just really naming the moment that we're in. I really loved Christ in the Rubble. And I think it's just important for us to wrestle with this, deal with it. And I think it's an important read. And so I think everybody should read Arthur Isaac's Christ in the Rubble.
Amen.
I'm excited about that one. I remember his sermon from, was it last year? That sermon?
That was 2 years ago. Yeah.
Like unforgettable. But I didn't know there was a book. So had my head under a rock, apparently. Number one for me, The Correspondent, the sleeper hit by Virginia Evans. Apparently it took her 7 years to write this book.
Wow.
I don't know if you would call her a failed novelist before, but they just never expected this novel to do as well as it's doing. I'm not going to restate what you stated, but it is a story about a story told in letters, and not necessarily back and forth letters. It's a story told in letters to various people. She writes to people like Joan Didion. She writes to, oh my gosh, who are all the people she writes to? She writes to some famous people, but she's also writing to her sister, her brother. There's an adoption line in there. It's a book about grief. It's a book about pretending. It's a book about negligence. It's a book about repentance. It is just one of the most profound books that I've read in a long time. It went immediately to the top of my list as soon as I finished it. And I thought, one of the ways that I measure is a book good is how many people do I want to give this book to? And the entire time I was reading it, people were coming to my mind, and they weren't just people. They were coming to my mind because either they're really good letter writers already, or they're just people who find a lot of value in correspondence, but also people coming to mind that I have loved and not loved well and want to love better. People came to mind that I have hurt or harmed and haven't made total reconciliation with. People came to mind who have hurt me in profound ways and who have never reconciled with me in ways that I am just, how am I complicit in carrying anger or grief or sadness still because of those relationships? I just think it was just such a profound book, and it deserves every accolade she's getting. I hope this book, it reminded me in some ways of Marilyn Robinson's Gilead. I don't know what it was about it, but it just had that same sense of weightiness that we get as we grow old, that we're just reflective, and we have a choice. We can either reflect and be humble, or we can reflect and become hard. And it was so beautiful. It's just an unforgettable story to me. It was unforgettable.
Yeah. Great number one. I mean, that's so good. I loved it.
I'm going to start it tomorrow. I am so inspired by you guys. This is so good. Thank you. Wow.
Yeah. So good. She has a little correspondence with a Syrian refugee that I mean, as someone who worked with Syrian refugees, I just like, whoa, it was so good. I was like, I was hoping for a little bit more, but every little detail and every little correspondence and every little, it's so good.
Not a wasted word, not a wasted, everything was telling the story that was moving towards something beautiful, and even in ways that we couldn't anticipate. Yeah, just beautiful, beautiful story.
All right. Number one, Byron, excited for it.
All righty. Well, I don't know if this is the number one, but it's the number one I want to tell you about just because it is so special to me. It is a book called World of Wonders by Jeff Crosby, and it is a spirituality of reading. I did a webinar about a month ago with Jeff when the book first came out from Paraclete Press, and we chatted about books and just had a blast talking about our favorite books and so forth. You guys would love Jeff if you don't know him. Came to Christian faith by going to visit a little Christian bookstore and ended up working in the bookstore, ended up working in the bookstore supply chain of big suppliers, some warehouses, ended up becoming the executive editor of InterVarsity Press for a while, and now works for a trade association. So he's done just about every single thing, and he's written 2 books. He's done just about every single thing that you can do in the book world. He's been an agent for people as well, an editor. So he knows his stuff. And what this book does is just makes the case that you both would know, and your listeners probably do as well, but why we need to read widely. The first part is called Laying the Foundations, and he looks at reading as a spiritual discipline, why stories matter. He even looks at the Bible and reading the Bible in that kind of way. Why read it all in this busy, disconnected world? Then he moves into the wide world of reading, and he looks at fiction and poetry, reading books by diverse authors, people that you wouldn't ordinarily read, perhaps other cultures or other genders. And so that diverse voices piece is good. He has a whole chapter on reading memoirs and why that's important. Then he has a section called Reading Through the Seasons of Life. And it's about family life and grief and doubt and fear. He has a chapter on that, reading through the liturgical year. And so he has a chapter on wonder that he ends with, reading books that put you in a place of wonder. So there's all these different sort of ways and means of why you read and why you read widely and how you do that deeply in Christian ways. At the end of every chapter, he interviews somebody, either a bookseller or an author or a friend, who has something else to say about the subject. So it's kind of a collaborative conversation with other book lovers as well. It is just beautiful. And he mentions Hearts and Minds in here, which I have to say is a matter of honesty, but that's really, you could skip that page. It doesn't matter. It is a great, enjoyable world of wonders. Carolyn Weber wrote the foreword. I really, really like it. And it's one of my favorite books to tell people about this year because it explains why it is we do what we do.
So good. A book lover's book right there. It's so good. Yeah. Wonder. It's good. Great pick. Great choice. I'm excited to check that one out. I haven't checked it out.
It's
so
nice.
It's going to be good. Yeah. As I was interviewing this author of my number 1 book, she told me something. She says, I'm not trying to fight MAGA or Christian nationalism. I'm trying to burrow under it with stories of love. And this is what she does, I think, in A Beautiful Year, which is Diana Butler Bass's book, 52 Meditations on Faith, Wisdom, and Perseverance. It is gorgeous. I read it and then I'm like, I don't want to just like read it. I need to luxuriate in each of these meditations. And so that's what I'm doing this year. I started with Advent and I'm just going through the reflections slowly. It's right there. Byron's got it. But I'm fascinated with time and love and empire. And for her to walk through the calendar of Rome and the Roman calendar and how we're shaped by it and how the Christian calendar actually forms us and shapes us in a different way, how time in the Christian calendar is more circular than it is linear, as moving towards something that the Roman calendar says everything that we do is like important. It's always the end of the world. And so, I mean, that's what we've been talking about. There's anxiety and it's like everything feels like we don't know how to be human anymore. But the Christian story and the Christian calendar will help us slow down and root ourselves into a different time and space that, I've long since just been fascinated by this concept of love being outside of time and that it merges both the past and the future and coalesces in the present with us, that if God is love, he is outside of time, that love is outside of time. And she deals with a lot of time and love. And so that's what she does in this, is she burrows under with stories of love. And it is a beautiful year. And it's a beautiful book. And that's my favorite book of the year. Diana Butler Bass's A Beautiful Year.
It has been our biggest selling book because she recommended in her newsletter or Substack to tell people to buy it from us. And so we've been sending this book out all over the country. We did a launch party with her in Lancaster at a Presbyterian church there, Highland Presbyterian. And her lecture is online. If you go to Highland Presbyterian, of her kind of introducing the book, and it was the first time she introduced it anywhere. We were the first bookstore to have it and got it early, and we're there. And so I'm up there telling people about it, and then she lectures for an hour about the liturgical calendar as an act of resistance to the empire. It was spectacular.
Yeah.
I had it here because I thought you might give us a minute to say, what are you going to read next? Because it is 52 readings. It's almost like you read it through a year.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to name it as the book for next year that everybody should get in January. A beautiful year, 52 meditations on faith, wisdom, and perseverance. So you're absolutely right on, Joshua. I'm a big fan of this.
Does it start in Advent? Is that where it starts?
Yes, it starts in Advent. Yeah. So get it right now.
Get it right
start
now.
reading. Okay. Yeah. It is. So we've been doing this. I've been reading it for our Advent reflections at night on Sundays with my family. So it's fun to have my 8-year-old in the room while we're reading Diana Butler Bass. But he's, I don't know. Then he has his own little...
you've had her on your show, right?
Yeah.
Of course you have.
Yeah. And that was my favorite conversation of the year.
I love that.
With her. She was so good. We just started to geek out on time. And at the beginning, I was like, okay, we got to talk about other things. But we could have just talked about the time and the concept of time the whole time. But it was really good. Great. Any honorable mentions or anything next year? Anything that you were like, hey, I just would love to mention a few things that were close.
Oh, goodness.
I'll tell you. I mean, I got a handful, but I'll tell you just one or two quick ones. The Myth Makers is a graphic novel, graphic design about the relationship of Lewis and Tolkien and why they wrote stories. It's by John Hendricks, who's an artist, and the graphic novel design is very creative. And the heart of the book is that they told mythic stories to push back against the disenchantment that comes from secularization and modernity. So there's something pretty philosophical going on in their storytelling, and he tells it in the Myth Makers as an example of pushing back against secularization. I adore Beth Macy, a journalist. I would read anything she writes, and her latest book is called Paper Girl, where she goes back to her old hometown in Rust Belt, Ohio, and wondered why the town is being decimated with racism and Trump and economic problems, and the school is having hard times, and of course the opioid thing, which she's written about before. Paper Girl by Beth Macy was one of my favorite books of the year. And the favorite book that I think I read all year, but it doesn't come out until January, so I read an advance copy, is called Hints of Hope by my friend Steve Garber. They're essays on what he calls being proximate. We can't build a perfect world. We're never going to stop all the evils of the world, but we can be content with making somewhat of a difference, approximate. And so as we look at hints of hope, we can sort of be in this for the long haul without going cynical or being burned out. We have sort of visions of vocation that lead us to make a difference in the world in sensible ways, and we're okay with it not changing everything, but coping with sort of our own doubts and pessimism as we struggle to offer hints of hope, as he calls it. I think it's the most beautiful book, and at least the most beautiful nonfiction book I've read all year. And it comes out in January from Paraclete.
Amazing. What do you have, Lori, for us?
I don't know. I feel like I read so many things this year, and I don't have them sitting in front of me, so it's hard to I think one that comes to mind that I really loved, I read it in January of this past year, was Liz Charlotte Grant's book Knock at the Sky, which was just just a really, I think what she was doing was really interesting to me. I love books that sort of don't fit the sort of, I don't know, here's the problem, here's the solution.
Yeah.
And she walks through science. I think the subtitle of the book is Seeking God in Genesis After Losing Faith in the Bible. Yeah. And so she just walks through the book of Genesis, and she walks through these grand stories that we have, grown up in church with, these sort of felt forward narratives, and just kind of looks at them in a different way and in a new light. She's a great writer, a wordsmith. And she brought in lots of pop culture, art. It was sort of catnip for me. Science, those sort of things are just, I love those kind of books. So that one was really good. I read Weathering by, I think her name is Ruth Allen, and she's a geologist. And so also, again, I just really love books about the natural world. And so she's writing about the natural world. She's writing about, in particular, rocks and the ways that we sort of see these eons of time happening through geology. Those are some two that I really enjoyed from this past year as well. I'm trying to think of other. I actually just did my like top.
Yeah.
I should look at that really quickly and see if
We'll
there's
point
anything else.
everybody to that in a little bit and let people see a little bit more of what's on Lori's list on her Substack, Sayable, which is fantastic. I think a lot of my 11 through 20 were mentioned by stuff I have read or what you have mentioned. A couple that haven't, that's really good. One is The Uncool by Cameron Crowe. His memoir about him being a rock journalist when he was 15 years old. Man, that was so much fun. Almost Famous is one of my favorite movies, which is basically, he tells the story of that. But what's the true story behind it? I loved his memoir, The Uncool.
Yeah.
I was going to put that on my list, and I thought it might not be suitable for your listeners.
Oh, it probably would be.
I know. I showed my wife my list last night, and she's like, "You didn't put Cameron Crowe on your top 10? Like, why not?" Like, I know.
It was so fun.
It was really, really fun. I really loved The Justice of Jesus by Joash Thomas. That was a really good one. And then Reviving the Golden Rule by Andrew DeCourt, which is he walks through the abolition of othering. That's I think really good and important. But mention most of the others. So those are great. So how could people connect with both of you? Where would you like to point people to? And I know that everybody who's listening could go to Hearts and Minds and get these books. But where else would you like to point people to, Lori?
I mainly hang out at Lori Wilbert, LORE, Wilbert.com. It's my Substack is where I hang out. Sayable.
Perfect. And Byron?
We've got the Hearts and Minds book notes newsletter that goes out every week. And we don't have all our inventory online. We're not one of these fancy kind of, we're an old brick and mortar store, but we try to humanize the online space by offering book reviews, and people order from us and I write back almost like a letter saying, yes, I got your order personally. And people are like, you're not an algorithm. I really get a reply from a bookseller when I place an order. I'm like, yep, that's how we do it. Kind of old school. So yeah, heartsandmindsbooks.com is our website, and there's a book notes newsletter you can sign up for if you want.
Great.
We send books all over the country.
Well, yeah. So if you heard and you want to get a book, go to Hearts and Minds and fill out the form. Just say, these are the books I want to order. And just tell them that you heard Byron here on Shifting Culture, Top Books. And so reach out, let them know, and get these books. They're fantastic. Well, Lori, Byron, thank you for walking us through your year of reading of 2025 and your favorite books that you read. It was fantastic. And I have a longer list now. I'm sure we all do have a longer list to pick up. And so thank you. It was wonderful to be together.
It was a blast.
Thank you.
Thanks.